Happy Savings Month. Happy National Savings Month to all of you. My name is Thobela and this is Ezakwamkhozi, our platform for daily money matters. So today I just want to talk about the National Savings Month and what it means to me. What it means, in July 2020, in the current economic environment that we find ourselves in. And just a brief overview on what has been happening in the market over the past few months is we have seen, three big data coming out. And that is, the inflation data came out at 3%. And also the GDP data came out, and then we've also seen the unemployment stats coming out. So I think those are huge numbers. Those are numbers that are giving a very grim picture of what is happening in our economy. So just to start, in the beginning, inflation is currently at 3%, and that's that's down from 4.1%, that it was in March, and I think we can, take that number, with a pinch of salt, because we've been in lockdown. So a couple of things, were not available in the market. So of course there were adjustments to that basket that the Stats SA is collecting, but also it wasn't very easy to collect the data because of lockdown. So there were adjustments that were made into that figure, and that's why it's 3%. But I mean, the point is, it is 3%. And why is that figure important? So the Reserve Bank targets inflation. One of their mandate is to keep inflation between 3 and 6%. And now we are seeing inflation on the lower side of that band at 3%. Now, when inflation goes down, the Reserve Bank has room to cut rates. When inflation goes up, the Reserve Bank has room to increase interest rates to try and get inflation back into that band. So now that we are seeing inflation coming down again, it means that there's room for the Reserve Bank to further cut interest rates. Now, you've seen some of my videos where, I've highlighted that this year alone in 2020, our interest rates have come down by 2.75%. So in the market, there's an expectation that, the Reserve Bank is going to cut rates again because, the economy is struggling, consumer is struggling. Please go and listen to that video so that you can understand how the rate cuts are relieving consumers. So I mean, if that is something that we can expect from the Reserve Bank, given, the understanding of how they manage, inflation, that's something that's on the card. And it means that, if you've got debt that is linked to prime, you should be expecting, going forward to benefit should there be any possible rate cuts. But I mean, that's something that I want to chat about a little bit more. But the other data that came out, is the GDP. So GDP contracted by 2%, so it fell by 2%. Now there's of course we are expecting growth to come down more than that. There's been forecast. Even the Reserve Bank has forecasted around 7, GDP to come down more than 7%. So this is just the first quarter. And one thing that I want to highlight, remember, the first quarter only included March, and we went into lockdown on the 26th of March. So you need to understand that that figure of -2% does not take into account the bigger part of lockdown. So you can definitely expect that figure to come down a bit further. And I think the third one, which is a bit scary, is, the unemployment data that came out, which is at 30.1%. I also feel like that data, doesn't encapsulate the level of unemployment that is happening in the market. It does not fully, reflect it. So I do believe that we can expect the second data that comes out of unemployment to be a bit worse. But we know that we've got high youth unemployment in the country, and that is something that is still prominent even in this figure. So on the backdrop of those three things that I've just mentioned, I mean, there are other things that are happening. How do we then look at savings? What does then savings mean if, we know that we've got an economy that is struggling? We've got an economy that is shedding jobs. We've got inflation that is at 3%. And I mean, that means a lot of things. It means that, yes, we can benefit from interest rates that are being cut. But it also means that, for savers, rates that are coming down are not positive for savers. So what does savings month mean on the back of this? And I think for me, it means a couple of things. And I think these are the things that, I believe we should be prioritizing in this time. And I think one, it becomes very, very important to budget. It becomes really important to account for every penny that you have, because then you know how you are using your money. So I feel like for me, it goes without saying, really look at your budget, account for everything so that you know exactly where you are channeling your money. I think the other thing that's quite important for me is, and I know that, people that do YouTube videos, they talk about this, it's done to death, and that is the importance of an emergency fund. Emergency funding came into such an important play during this lockdown because the halting of activity meant that, people's livelihoods got put into halt. Now, for people that did not have emergency funds, that was it, and also you needed to do a lot of last minute unbudgeted spendings. And if you did not have an emergency fund, it means that you would have had to finance those things through debt or go without those things. But I mean, I think what's very important is that if you couldn't work for that 3 months, if there's a work no pay, then it helps to have an emergency funding. But even besides that, just as a culture, it helps to have an emergency funding, because the things that this period has taught us a lot of things. It has taught us that things can happen, just like that. That requires an emergency fund. So I think an emergency fund becomes very important. And I think also when it comes to us as consumers, shopping around now becomes very important. So we need to save wherever we can. So I believe that we should be shopping around, even for car insurance. If you can save 100 rands, that's a lot. That's a lot right now. So I believe that shopping around is quite important. And if you can do it, if you can save, by all means. The other thing that I think, is quite important during this time is financing of debt. So now I talk about, that interest rates are coming down. And when interest rates come down, of course, they are quite positive for debt consumers. So now debt is very cheap. So if you go and take debt, whether you are taking debt towards a home loan, towards, whatever that has debt that is linked to prime, is going to benefit. But if you take new debt right now, chances are the interest rate on that debt is going to be quite low. So should you then be paying an account that is charging an interest of 20-something%? Chances are no, not at this point in time where prime is currently at 7.2%. So I do think that, getting rid of those high interest rate debt is very important. And if those are big debts, probably refinancing those debt is also something that can be looked at. And I know that, that's something that's quite possible to do, because interest rates are low. You shouldn't really be paying high interest rates, not at this point in time. So I think trying to tackle high interest rate debt is going to be very important right now. And if those are long-term debt, trying to refinance that becomes also quite a very important thing to consider. And I think the last one, should you have excess funds after all of this, I think savings becomes an important activity to do. And I think we should be deliberate about saving. We should be deliberate. Even if it's 100 rands, we should set a debit order that takes that 100 rands into an account where that 100 rand can earn the low interest that it can earn. But I mean, you are saving 100 rand towards whether it's your emergency fund, that rainy day. Like, I just feel like we should be deliberate about saving at this point in time. So it is a very difficult time that we're finding ourselves in, and South Africa is in recession, but I mean, the global economy is in recession. So COVID found South Africa a very weak economy, an economy with high unemployment. So while while the environment that we are in is not very special to South Africa, but we are probably worse off because we were in a worse off position to start with. So that makes, this conversation very difficult to have a conversation around savings where everyone is struggling. So I just believe that, this time we should just be prioritizing getting out of debt as much as we can. And the way to do that is to have structured finances. So let's build up a budget. Let's stick to our budget. Let's be disciplined about our budget, and let's be intentional about each and everything. So whether it's setting up that budget, whether it's saving that 100 rands each and every month, let us be intentional. And then the other thing is that emergency savings has been spoken about to death and probably overdone, but we cannot emphasize the importance of that enough. Because a lot of South Africa, we are all living from month to month. And when things like the lockdown happen, when unexpected things happen, it becomes very important to have that emergency funding so that you can transition from one situation to another. And probably looking at your debt and how you are standing in terms of your debt, ensuring that you are not paying high interest debt, will also be an important exercise this period. Thank you very much, family, and stay safe out there, and happy Savings Month. And remember, it's all about, the culture, the attitude, and it starts small. So thank you very much. I love you.